The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
My guest today, back with us, Dr. Edwin Vieira, a judicial scholar, a watchman on the wall, trying to awaken the slumbering masses, including his state legislature and the criminals in D.C., of how the system is really supposed to operate. Dr. Vieira, welcome.
Happy to be with you again, Randy.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. You're a wealth of information. I wanted to start out before the sun goes down and the station powers down. I wanted to start out on your thoughts of all of the deluded women that showed up in D.C. and Denver and L.A. and Chicago and San Francisco and all over the world, wearing their stupid little pink hats, protesting for women's rights. Like somehow they have been shackled to the kitchen sink and can move from there to the stove, and they're shackled down. I mean, if they really wanted to protest something, why weren't they jumping on the airlines and flying to Cairo and Tripoli and Riyadh and Mecca and Medina and protesting there? Huh?
Well, it certainly is amazing that the thrust of those marches or demonstrations was directed at President Trump.
Yes.
That is, that he is somehow responsible for an attack on this amorphous category called women's rights, without specifying what actions he has taken or has threatened to take. I mean, if someone is protesting against losses of women's rights, one would think, well, first we look in the past. I mean, what happened under the Obama administration, for instance? Or, as you pointed out, what happens in other parts of the world with these dictatorial regimes in which women are worse than second-class citizens. They're not treated as citizens at all under any category.
Well, they treat their dogs and their goats better than they do their women.
Yes, I suppose you can make that judgment. But you would think that these people who claim to have such a deep or penetrating political understanding would be perhaps more worried about these foreign countries to which this country, unfortunately, is supplying a great deal of aid and support and buttressing those regimes than they would be complaining about President Trump, who has yet to take any actions that fall within this category of suppression of rights. I mean, one could also get into the rights that they're trying to claim that they want to have. Of course, this all comes back to the cultural Marxist strategy of creating identity groups, pressure groups, so as to divide and conquer society by breaking down any kind of social, political, economic, cultural cohesion. And male and female, I mean, the Marxists started off, classically speaking, with the difference between the working class and the bourgeoisie, the employer class or the class that owned capital. That didn't work out too well, because we saw the results of that in places like the Soviet Union, Communist China, still seeing the results of that. And And the theory was nonsense economically, so they had to shift at a certain point in time to develop other forms of class consciousness, or shall we say class conflict, which is the real goal. And here was one, the male-female dichotomy, which was perfect because it's determined by biology. I mean, there are males and there are females, and neither of the twain shall meet or exchange identities biologically, if you will. And there would always be differing cultural, social, and economic roles, if you will, for males and females, deriving ultimately from biological necessity, if you will. So here the neo-Marxists had a perfect working ground for using this divide and conquer strategy. All they had to find was some basis for dissent, as it were, from the present social order that they could, generate a political movement based upon. And of course, your point is, well, what are they complaining about? I mean, that's the real problem here. In the United States, it seems to me that it's gotten to the point that you can't really distinguish in any way, shape, or form the rights of women from the rights of men. At least, there's legal categories, if you will. So what is it that they're protesting? I mean, maybe you can tell me. I didn't hear it.
I didn't hear it, other than they were protesting Donald Trump and the loss of the first woman candidate for president, but they never bothered to research her background, her history, her judge them by their fruits.
Well, it seems a rather sexist theory that someone should be elected president because she's a female.
Yes, well, I mean...
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings, and to his kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation, under our Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
The Greatest Prophecy DVD from Cross the Border Productions. Embrace the little-known The Greatest Prophecy given by the great high priest, the Messiah, reveals the Creator's once secret plan for mankind at the first sacrificial event. Believe it. Behold the end times in Daniel chapter 2, because
the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure.
It is the key to prophecy future. Comprehend the 7-year great tribulation, deception. Be not deceived. Understand the great prophecy delusion, because
if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect.
Be forewarned. America in prophecy, exposed for all to see. You must see it. The mark of the beast. No, it's not a biochip. A much better and more secure technology is already here, and you are already using it. We will bonus you with a free copy of Richard Bennett's groundbreaking work, The Inquisition, when you send a support donation of $20 to First Amendment Radio. Visit the shopping page at our website or send $20 cash to First Amendment Radio, 139 East Tulare, Tulare Avenue, Tulare, California, 93274. Send your support donation of $20 cash to First Amendment Radio, 139 East Tulare, Tulare, Tulare Avenue, Tulare, California, 93274, or $30 U.S. for international priority mail outside the USA. A wise man is forewarned and prepares for the times to come. Will you be ready? The Greatest Prophecy DVD. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
His seminars and presentations you can find on YouTube. Just type in Dr. Edwin Vieira, Vieira, and his articles published at newswithviews.com, newswithviews.com. Talking about the poor deluded women marching all over, proclaiming they are rightless. They have no rights. We have no rights. But how does a what do I want to use the word? A traitor, an enemy from within named George Soros, and the funding of demonstrations like this and organizations to bring down the American Republic. I mean, we could consider him as a traitor, couldn't we?
Well, probably not as yet within the narrow definition of treason under the Constitution, but there are probably a half a dozen or more. Well, what is this enemy? He is an enemy in the sense of the constitutional system. I just don't like to bandy that word around because the framers made a very concise and restricted definition for a reason. Under the Old English law, treason had been a political crime that was really plastic or amorphous. It really didn't have a specific set of boundaries around it, and it was used to suppress people who were challenging in some way or other the particular monarchy or the ministerial structure in Parliament at the time. So the Founding Fathers looked at that and said, well, we don't want to continue that term in that manner to leave it open for Congress or an executive that had pretensions to dictatorial regime to use it as a method of suppressing legitimate political discourse and dissent. So I leave that aside. I look at these poor people who went to the demonstration, and I say, well, they're basically useful idiots. Do they ever ask the question of where did the money come from? Where did the organization come from? Who got them to come to these things, and what the ultimate goal is? All right? They were, Lenin called, quite correctly, useful idiots. They don't understand how they're being used for an ulterior purpose, in this case being funded to a large extent by the various NGOs, non-governmental organizations that Soros funds. And Soros is very clear about what he wants to do. I mean, it's not just overthrow Trump. It's to make a basic change, fundamental change, in America's system of government and culture and society and economics. I mean, the man is very much up front in the sense of laying out his subversive agenda. And I would think anyone that takes a look at some organization funded by Soros and asks himself, do I want to be part of the agenda this organization is putting forward? And doesn't come to the conclusion there's a problem there from the point of view of, Americanism, is a really deluded character. And what are we going to do with those people? It's a result of, a generation or two of public education that's been dominated by organizations like the National Education Association, American Federation of Teachers.
And the professors in the higher institutes of learning.
Well, they come out of the public school system, and then they go into the colleges, right, as students, and then they go into the teachers' colleges or what have you, and they become professors, and so, of course, they're going to regurgitate the pablum that they've been fed for those many years of grade school and high school and then college, right until they're, 22, 23 years old. They've been propagandized. So you kind of expect this. It's a natural consequence of the takeover by the Marxist intelligentsia of the educational process in this country. And I can remember going back many years when I was a litigator, litigating against the National Education Association in particular. And we had the opportunity to go into a lot of their books and records. Many of them public. Okay. Many of these records were public, where they made no bones about what they wanted to do in terms of changing the direction of American thinking and then of the society as a whole in a definitely leftist direction. This was not something that you had to analyze, be a political scientist, and read between the lines. It was stated. And then after 1960, when it was 1964, when Wisconsin passed the first public sector collective bargaining statute, the NEA became dominant in compulsory collective bargaining in public education. And that gave them a very powerful role in controlling the content of what was going on. And then, of course, they had people coming out of the teachers' colleges that were thinking along the same lines as they were, and those folks became administrators in the public educational system. And now we see the consequences of this. And actually, the consequences of this are the responsibility of 10 people. 10 people on the Supreme Court of the United States. And I say 10 because there were 2 cases that I actually litigated. And one of the justices, Justice Stewart, left the court, and Justice O'Connor came on. So there was a change there, and there were 10 people on the Supreme Court. Had 2 opportunities to stop this, or at least to mitigate it, shall we say. And they failed to do so. They rolled over completely and swallowed the entire line that there should be compulsory public sector bargaining with essentially no real limitations on it. So we can look back and say this was not accidental. It was something that those organizations set out to do. Legislators came along and gave them the authority to inject themselves into the control of public sector education through collective bargaining. And when the Supreme Court was given opportunity to limit this in some way, specifically pointing out to them what the political and financial problems were of this system, they just rolled over and rubber stamped and said, oh, it's fine, no problem. So that's where we are today. And you look back, I look back at that and I say, really, it's those 10 people. Because forget the legislators for a moment. We were telling, in the cases I litigated, we were telling the Supreme Court, you have to put limitations on the ability of these private organizations, the NEA in particular, and the AFT in another case, through public sector collective bargaining, you have to put some constitutional limitations on this, or what they will end up doing is dominating this structure for the worst. And the court, with its great concern for the Constitution, just as I say, rubber stamped it and looked the other way.
Yeah, and they end up writing the textbooks. They end up writing the teachers' guides and everything else to what the children are learning. And well, if school board questions it, then off with their head.
Well, they have a difficult time questioning it under the compulsory public sector collective bargaining regime. They are required, the administrators, public school boards, if you're talking about the local level and maybe the higher level administrators, and once you get into community colleges, say, they are required by law to sit down and negotiate with the NEA or the AFT, the teacher union that has been certified as the exclusive bargaining representative. There's no way out of it for them. And they are required to bargain, as they say, in good faith, so as to come to some kind of resolution of the differences. And the difficulty in the public sector as opposed to the private sector is, of course, the public sector administrators are directly or indirectly elected officials, right? So what the NEA typically does at the local level, well, they support particular people running for that office as opposed to others, and they get their candidates into the local school boards, and then they're bargaining on both sides of the table. All right? That's the scheme. And out of that comes a couple of things. First, fiscal irresponsibility, and we see that in public sector unionism across the country, how they have destroyed municipal solvency. The fiscal solvency of these municipalities been destroyed because of public sector unionism. And then in the educational area, not only that, but then they destroy the quality, the content of public education. It's the worst of all possible worlds. All right? Well, losing a little money on the one side is all right. We don't want that, but we can live with that in the long run. But when you destroy whole generations of children's minds, what must be the consequence? And I say, if you look back at this, most people don't realize it. It happened in 1964 when Wisconsin, as I say, was the first one to set up a compulsory collective bargaining regime for public employees. So it was only the matter of when, from 64 to when was Carter elected? 1980?
1976.
He was 76. No, he must have been 1980. In any event, Carter gave them the Department of Education.
Yes.
Between 1964 and the Carter election, they became sufficiently powerful, the NEA, so they could endorse and work for his election on the implicit understanding that once he came in, he would give them education, and they were successful, and it's still there. Right?
Right.
Public sector collective bargaining is still there. The dominance of the National Education Association at almost every level of education in this country is still there. And the Department of Education is still there. And the American people haven't awakened in how many generations? 25 years. So we're talking, almost 3 generations. In almost 3 generations, the American people have not awakened to the problem. That they have these children in colleges now, these snowflakes, as they're called, looking for their safe spaces. Now, they don't want to get in any kind of discussion with anyone that takes a position different from their, liberal agenda. That this is the result of a structure that has been built.
They can't even articulate their liberal agenda.
Well, that's even worse. But they don't even want to discuss anything in this area. This is not an accident. This is a result of a structure that was systematically developed, put into place, and approved at the very highest level of the American structure. It's the Supreme Court of the United States. Right?
Yes.
So if you want to talk about, people like to talk about conspiracy and so forth. Well, in a sense, this was a conspiracy, obviously. It was a concerted effort to gain power for an illicit end. But it was one that was done completely in the open. The NEA told everyone what its agenda was. The state legislators passed these public sector collective bargaining laws, and the courts, all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, said that's just fine and dandy. And here we have the result. So in any particular state, you can go back and probably find the people who passed these laws. They're a very small number of people relative to the population of those states.
Yes.
The legislatures who voted for those laws. And then the judges at different levels, so these laws were challenged at various points, the judges who approved these all the way to the 10 people in the Supreme Court of the United States. They are the ones responsible for this mess. Not Mr. Trump, not the vast number of Americans whom Mrs. Clinton called deplorables, not even for Americans in general. It's not their responsibility. We can actually name these people, and we could probably make a list that would go on one sheet, or maybe 2 sides of one sheet of, a typical lawyer's yellow pad.
Yes.
That's how small the number would be.
And here we are. And they've, in a sense, in that area, they have destroyed this country because would now have to rebuild almost from scratch the entire educational system that they have undermined. And I don't know if President Trump will, and his education secretary will be able to get it done.
Well, it's very difficult because, the Department of Education really has no constitutional basis.
Well, no, wait. Article 28. Hereby is established the Department of Education. Oh. Sorry, it's not there.
That might be the Soviet Constitution, the Russian Constitution, not the United States Constitution. So, if you look to the Trump administration, you might say, well, they could end the Department of Education, but that would not solve the problems I'm talking about at the state and local level.
No. Stay tuned. We'll be right.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS. crosstheborder.org to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, Don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
And we're back. Dr. Edwin Vieira, my guest today. You can find his articles at newswithviews.com, his seminars and presentations at youtube.com, and his books available at amazon.com. If you want to know about the militia, how it was set up from the very beginning, the sword and sovereignty, it's a study that you need to do, folks. Check it out, amazon.com. Well, the public employee unions. Okay, well, let's just ask San Diego and Detroit and Dallas now that their pension funds and the promises they made to all these people are, well, going up in smoke. They're receiving the letters saying, well, you know, we just can't afford this. We're going to have to cut your pension by 2/3. And if the economic system continues, the banking system continues as it is, the rest of us are going to be asked to step forward and pay for these poor folks to, get their pension. We got a caller. Who we got?
Hey, this is Ann calling again, and I wanted to ask Edwin Vieira. The City of Westminster City Council is supporting the sanctuary cities, and the four, well, at least it seems to me, City Council members of 7 were supported by the NEA via they're contributing to 501c3s. So they don't directly give the money to the effort to elect these fraudsters, I'll say, because they aren't committed to their the oath of office that they take. And how was it? And can you address that oath of office conflict? Because they're obviously communists, and then they take their oath to support the people or whatever you want to say. So anyway, can you address this?
Well, the problem with the oath of office is how do you enforce it? It's hard to believe that, say, in the U.S. Constitution, Article 6, the founders put in the requirement that all state officials would take an oath or affirmation to support the Constitution, but that requirement would not in some way be enforceable when they failed to do so, right, when they violated their oaths. Now we have various civil rights statutes that, in a sense, cover that, because a violation of the oath of office in practice amounts to the violation of somebody's rights at a constitutional or statutory level. And so there are civil statutes, Title 42 of the United States Code, Section 1983. It's a good example of that, used very often. The criminal statutes, Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 241, 242. But, of course, those have to be brought by prosecutors. It can't be brought by private citizens. Difficulty you have, going back to the comment you made at the beginning, have these city councilors that are making your municipality into a sanctuary city. I just happen to have written an article in News Reviews not too long ago. It was published. It's called No Sanctuary Cities. You go to newsreviews.com and look in the contributor list. You'll find my name and click on that, and there's a list of all of the articles that I've published from the latest on to the earliest. And I think it's like number 3 or number 4, maybe number 5 from the top of that list. And it goes into the proposition that there are specific statutes that make criminal the type of activities that are involved in the typical sanctuary city situation, where they're essentially aiding and abetting and harboring and encouraging illegal aliens in one manner or another. And if you read the statute, the one that I cite in there is an interesting one because it makes the individual who does this, and it could be a public official as well as a private individual employer or what have you, it makes him subject to the criminal penalty for each alien that's involved.
Really?
Oh, yes. It's clear that each alien is a separate count. So if you're talking about a sanctuary city like New York, I heard this the other day, that New York, people in New York, maybe it was the mayor of New York, who was saying, we're going to continue to protect the illegal aliens in New York. There's some 700,000, they say, in the city of New York. You'd send the New York City Council to jail for 1 million years.
Yes.
Right? So I'm wondering, some of these things you talk about with Mr. Trump's administration, he wants to deal with sanctuary cities. Of course, he's talking about, and I think he's actually doing in some cases, cutting off federal monetary assistance to these jurisdictions that engage in that kind of activity. And I suppose that's a certain threat to them. Cut off the money.
So,
but if he's serious, he needs to go after some prosecutions of these people.
What if Ann gave the city council in Westminster there a notice and demand, notice of the violation of the law, and demand that they follow the law, or, well, this lawsuit's commence?
Well, the question is who's going to bring the lawsuit. This gets into the arcane aspects of litigation. The courts always look to the question of what they call standing.
Yes.
Are you an individual who has been injured by the action of this official in some manner which we in the judiciary can remedy in a court, either by giving you some money as damages, or by imposing an injunction, mandatory or prohibitory, against that particular official, saying that the official has to do something or refrain from doing something else, what have you. So they look at that, and in the case of, say, the illegal immigrants, one is going to have to come up against this peculiar doctrine that the courts started enunciating, I think back in the early 30s, that essentially if everyone in the community is equally hurt by a public official's violation of his authority, then no one really has standing to sue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that was used. It was originally used in some tax cases. They said, "Oh, all these taxpayers are equally harmed by this, so nobody has a right to sue." And then it was used again by some judges when people were challenging Barack Obama's eligibility for the presidency. They said, "Well, all sorts of voters have been harmed by this. He's ineligible, so therefore no one has standing to challenge this." And that might very well be the doctrine they would use to avoid. It's an avoidance technique. It's a way the courts get away from having to decide some question. And that would probably be the way they would try to get around the effective illegal aliens in general in a sanctuary city. Now, if you were someone who was injured by an illegal alien
in a
sanctuary
car wreck,
city,
or you were mugged, or so on.
That's right. So you had a direct personal injury as the result of these public officials not only failing to exercise their responsibility, but affirmatively doing the opposite. One would think that you'd have standing to sue.
Standing to sue. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Stay with us, Ann.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights media channel. You've noticed that there are few commercials on this radio network, and there's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our various affiliates. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs on our Listen and Schedule pages. Then when you subscribe, we'll send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately and continue with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We ask you to give much less than a tithe so that you may also send support directly to a particular program, host, or cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
And we're back. Dr. Edwin Vieira, my guest today. Ann, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. And I wanted to say, I don't know if he's finished with what he had to say to me, but I wanted to say something too.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. On another conservative radio show, a guest speaker said that a sanctuary city can be defined in its worst case as the following. An illegal is picked up for some offense that they've committed against our other laws in addition to whatever they, crossing the border. And that the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI have looked at this case and have both agencies or either one have said this person should be detained, and the city mayor or who's ever in charge of this particular area, says, no, we're just going to release them. Could you define what sanctuary city at its worst can be? We know that means anybody comes in here and then they just get to stay, is kind of like the minor part. The worst is when they really have a criminal behavior that is terribly dangerous, which could include murder and rape. And the local officials say, we'll let them go.
Well, that's the I suppose the major problem in terms of the concept of aiding and abetting these people, because the local municipal officials are refusing to cooperate with FBI, ICE primarily, right?
Yes.
In identifying, or if they have identified illegal aliens, in notifying the federal officials, holding those aliens in some kind of detention and then turning them over to the federal officials. They say they won't do that. Well, now, take an example. Let's say that someone has committed a crime. It doesn't even have to be an illegal alien. Someone has committed a crime, and he comes to me and he says, well, I've committed a crime, and I say, fine, I'm going to hide you. And I'm not going to turn you over, although I could. I'm not going to turn you over to the local police or the FBI, whomever would have criminal jurisdiction. What's my liability? Well, I'm an accessory after the fact to whatever crime that person has committed. Right?
Yes.
By hypothesis, okay? So in these situations where an illegal alien has committed a crime in addition to being an illegal alien, right? We always have to remember, he's an illegal alien. He already has a legal problem. But now he commits some other, and especially violent crime, and he comes into that sanctuary city, and the officials in the sanctuary city are aware that he is there, and they aid and abet him in secreting himself, and refuse to assist their own police, and ultimately the FBI and the DHS people. They make themselves accessories after the fact to whatever crime that person has committed. I mean, this is what I don't understand. I can understand this with the Obama administration, but with Mr. Trump, this has very little to do with money in the long run. The money that he's going to withhold from these jurisdictions because certain officials are engaged in the sanctuary city business. He needs to go after those individuals. That's how you deter this problem.
Yes.
Right? You go after them and say, well, you've engaged in a situation where we have a rapist, we have a murderer, and you have acted as an accessory after the fact in secreting this person and aiding this person in evading arrest. You are now going to be liable not only for that, because a separate liability for doing that, but for this other liability that's connected to the immigration laws, which, as I say, I quote in detail in this article I wrote for News with Views. So we have you on essentially two levels, and we need to prosecute you in order to, as they say, pour encourager les autres, to encourage the other people not to engage in this behavior. And as I say, in the classic case, if you or I aided and abetted a criminal fugitive from justice and secreted him in our own homes and so forth, there'd be no question that we'd be subject to criminal prosecution as accessories. No question of it. Why? Because we're public officials, are we given some kind of immunity, practical immunity? It escapes me. So maybe it won't escape Mr. Trump after a while, or Mr. Sessions, if he's accepted as Attorney General.
So, Ann, keep an eye out on your Westminster police report, okay? And that, auto accident, a mugging, murder, a rape, and if you can determine that it was caused by an illegal alien, you go to the website, News with Views, print off this article, study it, look up the law, read it, and then you go before the city council and you say, I'm putting you on notice that you're in violation of the United States Code, section, title this, section this, and just lay it on the line. Put them on notice. You're in violation of the law.
And then if you have sufficient facts, take it to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yes.
In your jurisdiction. Whatever state you're in. Take it to the U.S. Attorney's Office and say, look, I can document this, so I have probable cause to bring this to your attention, and you need to take this to a federal grand jury. See what they do. I mean, that's not always a sure cure, going in front of U.S. attorneys, right, because they have their own agendas. But at least it will be on record that someone made that complaint.
Okay. What kind of... I want to mention one other thing. See, at the same city council meeting on Monday, they had somebody who spoke. There were a few people who spoke who were, I mean, really identifying themselves as illegal aliens. One said that she had already registered to vote in this last election, something like 1,400 or 1,700 people. I'm assuming they weren't voters for Trump. So I just mention this because it's not just in Westminster. It's happening in many cities. So, you know, I've taken notes and I'll re-listen to your show. And thank you very much for your information. And I will get a team to work with to get this done. Because we can't work just as a lone ranger. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what it's going to take, is people coming together and saying enough is enough is enough. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
We'll be right back after this break.
Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
.com is seminars and presentations on YouTube.com, and his books available at Amazon.com. Amazon.com. The immigration law is Title 8, United States Code, Section 1324A1. And, well, it says it all right there.
And that's just one of them, Randy.
Yes.
I mean, that's one I picked out that was peculiarly apt. But, I mean, if you go through the Title 8, you'll find others. And if you go through Title 18, which is the criminal, specifically the criminal code, you'll find others as well.
Yes.
So this is not something that, that typical federal prosecutors should be unfamiliar with.
Well, and if you've had enough folks there in Denver, which is and the surrounding municipalities, like Westminster, if you've had enough of the illegals coming in, and you can go to I'm sure they record those video of go get a copy of it. And there you have the gal standing up there, and if she openly admitted, I'm an illegal alien, I mean, what a better evidence do you need? But that's what it's going to take, is people standing up and doing their homework and then going to the city council and putting on notice, hey, you're in violation. Yeah. United States Code, section, Title 8, section 1324.
And that's important, because obviously you want to undercut the potential defense that they would put forward. We were ignorant of this.
Yes.
Right. We didn't know. We didn't understand this when we were doing it. We were trying to act in good faith and so forth and so on. All of these excuses. Now they're told at a certain point in time, you better read this statute. What you're doing, Mr. City Councilman, is in violation of this statute. And we want you to stop it by such and such a day, or we're going to take it to the appropriate federal authorities who are charged with the enforcement of this.
Yes.
And see what they say.
And, watching the police record, the police report.
Absolutely.
And saying, if somebody's in a car crash and illegally within that jurisdiction, you could go to the victim and say, you possibly got a lawsuit against the city.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's all sorts of potential here. There's one funny thing I read this morning, that the mayor of Boston, which is, of course, a sanctuary city,
yes,
was saying that, these illegal aliens could come and live in the, his office, the mayor's office. Right? Okay. And the wags in the comment section were saying, well, why isn't he asking them to come and live in his own home?
Yes.
Right. But it seems to me there's a classic example of where the public official knows precisely what he's doing. He cannot claim ignorance. Ignorance of the law is no excuse in any event, but he cannot claim any kind of ignorance, or this is just done as a matter of being, good Samaritan or what have you. He understands perfectly well what he is doing. And it would strike me that at some stage in this process, someone in the Trump administration has got to bring that home to a grand jury.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
And we're back with the second hour of To Free America here on the American Freedom Network. And we still need your help, folks. Simple as that. Need your help. Pay the light bill, pay the phone bill, feed the squirrel out there running in the cage in the transmitter so the signal goes out to you. We need your help. Call Michael, call Cody, 800-205-6245, 800-205-6245. You can make a pledge on your plastic, order a copy of today's show or past shows we've done, other shows here on the network. That helps us out. You can pick up that envelope and address it to KHNC, P.O. Box 1750, P.O. Box 1750, Johnstown, Colorado, Federal Occupation Zone 80534. Your check, your money order, much appreciated. We'll even still take the fraudulent reserve notes. Other currencies, sure, throw them in. We'll pin them on the wall, compare colors. You could even throw in some just weights and measures, the Lord's money, at the very least. Tell your friends and family. Tune in 1360 AM on the internet at AmericaNewsNet.com. And call the advertisers, folks. Let them know you're out there, you're listening. You appreciate their support of American Freedom Network. My guest today, Dr. Edwin Vieira. You can find his articles at newswithviews.com, newswithviews.com. His seminars and presentations also at youtube.com, and his books available at amazon.com. The Sword and Sovereignty. You need to get that, find out about the militia. But this hour I wanted to discuss your recent articles, a monetary litmus test for Mr. Trump, or subtitled, President Trump, the Deplorables, and the Bankers.
That's your subtitle, but I think it's accurate.
Okay. That is probably the biggest battle. I mean, we talked about the education, we talked about the illegal immigration and everything else, but the biggest fight, the biggest thing is our monetary system in this country. We've had it now for over 100 years. They've taken the dollar from being 100 cents to being 2 cents. And we've got a $20 trillion debt. It cannot continue on. Every fiat system in history has failed. But I don't know if the president is willing to take on the bankers or not. I wonder.
Well, it's also a question of whether he understands the necessity to do it, right?
Right.
I mean, there's always the trepidation in the back of my mind that someone like Trump comes in and he takes the present system as a given. And he may try to reform it around the edges. He may try to improve it. He may try to shore it up, whatever your point of view is. But he's not going to challenge the fundamental principles of this system. And you have to understand that he spent his entire adult professional life in what? New York real estate, East Coast real estate, Atlantic City, international real estate, right?
Yes.
Which meant that he had to deal with the upper levels of the financial community.
And it has enriched him over his life.
Well, yeah, of course, his business has enriched him, and in dealing with the banks, that's been part of it. And he has been so successful that he's been capable of going bankrupt, or his enterprises gone bankrupt 2 or 3 times, and he's bounced back from that, right? So he knows how to use that system. The system has been profitable for him. And one wonders the extent to which he understands the real instability of that system and the dangers that it poses to the country and the real short-term need to start putting in some kind of corrective measures. And that was the point of this article, the monetary litmus test. Because on the other side of that, of course, is the ability of the bankers and the financial casinos in Wall Street and internationally to put tremendous pressure on a Trump administration through turning various economic screws.
Yes.
And they're doing it subtly, right? They don't need to crash the economy. They just need to point out to them that, well, if you go too far with these protectionist remedies that you're proposing, right, bringing jobs and capital investments so forth back to the United States, if you go too far with that, then you may see these untoward effects that we're capable of imposing on you. And you know what they've done? If you think back to the great Paulson bailout under Bush, $700 billion bailout, when you had the 2008 collapse. And what was the theory there?
Oh, there'll be riots and martial law by tomorrow morning if you don't pass this.
Yeah, if you don't bail us out of our improvident and in many instances criminal behavior and make the American taxpayers pay for it, then the consequence will be social upheaval, economic collapse, whatever, all these catastrophic events. Well, that was back then. Things are even worse now. Yeah. And they always play this game. If you don't give us more and more special privileges, if you don't bail us out or bail us in or whatever the expression may be from our improvident actions, then the consequences will be horrendous. And understand that we, the bankers and the financial manipulators, have the ability to make those consequences terrible. So we hold you hostage. To which I would say, well, you held us hostage for $700 billion, and our mistake was we didn't correct it at the time. Now you're holding us hostage for a couple of trillion, and you're giving us the same song and dance. At some point, we have to fish or cut bait. At some point, we have to say we will bite the bullet and deal with you people, because it always gets worse. It can never get better. All right. So this is his problem. On the one hand, he's someone who has been swimming in that swamp. On the other hand, he must recognize what the problems are in that kind of a system because he's come face to face with them. He will be pressured from the banker side to do nothing, or at least to do what they want him to do or not do. Is he willing to bite the bullet?
Willing to bite the bullet. We're going to talk more about this. Stay tuned here on the American Freedom Network.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights media channel. We hope that you have noticed that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our various affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, like a tithe. Missionary Radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs on our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. Then when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately and continue with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We ask you to give much less than a tithe so that you can also send support directly to a particular program host or cause and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Amazon.com. A monetary litmus test for Mr. Trump titled President Trump, the Deplorables, or the Masses, and the Bankers. Which is probably, if our monetary system and the way it works is probably one of the very top 1 or 2, 3 problems that must be addressed, or we're doomed to absolute chaos. Now, there's a whole lot of talk out there on the alternate media about how the elite, the globalist international, as you call them, and how they, were shocked and surprised that Donald Trump won the election, and their candidate didn't get in, and all that wasted money they gave to her. But the speculation being that Trump's in office here for 60, 90, 6 months, 180 days, and then they turn around and crash the economy, which they can do. They have the wherewithal to do that, but will they?
Well, of course, it depends on how you define crash, right? Are you talking about something of the scale of 1929 through 1933, 1934?
Yes.
That brings on what was called then the Great Depression, something along that line?
Yes.
Or are you talking about something that's more like the death of 1,000 cuts, where they do a little here and they do a little there and they make things progressively worse for the deplorables, right? Not for the elite, not for the 1/10 of 1%, but for the people who voted for Trump, or if they didn't vote at all, at least were more or less sympathetic to Trump, and essentially to teach them a lesson. Say, you fools, you voted for Trump, and he's not able to bring back these middle-class jobs. He's not able to effectuate an economic recovery. In fact, things are getting worse for you. Now, we the elite are not telling you that we're the ones causing that. All right? But it's happening while Trump is the president, and unfortunately, the attitude of people in this country has increasingly developed, in my lifetime certainly, into what the Germans called the Führer principle, the Führerprinzip, right?
Yes.
That the leader is in charge of everything, and on the other side is responsible for everything. And of course, that's the way the presidential campaigns have been running. The presidential candidate gets up there and says, if you put me in, I'm going to make all of these fundamental changes, parenthesis, even though I actually don't have the constitutional power to do it, close parenthesis. And people believe that. And so they vote for a candidate on the basis of the promises of what he's going to do for them. And of course, when things go sour later on, they tend to blame that administration in office, even though it may not be the administration is actually responsible for these events. Right? The economic foundations of this country have been rotting away for many more years than the number of days that Mr. Trump has been in office. So if we had an economic crisis coming up in, let's say, the spring or summer of this year, it could hardly be blamed on Mr. Trump, right?
Right.
Because these events have all been percolating out there in the financial and monetary markets, not just in the United States, but throughout the world for a long time. And in fact, we can take them all the way back to 1913 if we want to do a historical analysis, right? The Federal Reserve System is the ultimate cause of this. We go all the way back to then. But there's the problem that they could, the globalist international, as I call them, the money people, could be setting up Trump as a new Herbert Hoover type candidate, or new Herbert Hoover type figure. Here's the fellow in charge, the economic crisis occurs, he's responsible. And that would then cause a couple of things to happen. First, you have another congressional election coming up in 2018, right, for the entire House of Representatives and a third of the Senate, and that might result in the Democrats making a comeback and getting control of the Senate, or at least a significant number of votes in the House, so that they could stymie,
or even both,
or in both, so they could really stymie anything that Trump would be able to do for the next 2 years, and make his administration into essentially a eunuch, politically speaking, right, unable to accomplish and to father any good reforms. And then in 2020, the Democrats would come back with a viable candidate as opposed to one of the Clintons, and win the White House again. So that could very well be their strategy, and the crash would not be a total demolition of the economy. But as I said, it would be the death of 1,000 cuts, and these would be blamed on Trump and the Republicans in Congress supporting him. And there might be very little he could do about it unless he wanted to take the banks on directly. All right?
And the 1,000 cuts, and the more I think about it here, that if I was one of the global elite, that's the way I would do it.
Yeah.
Because, you can hide it.
And it's not as risky for them either. You crash the American economy using that word crash in the apocalyptic sense, and you're going to bring down a lot of the rest of the world economy as well.
Right.
And then it's really all bets are off. Right? If you want to do this, from their perspective, you want to do this in a systematic, measured, controlled fashion that they can manage through the big media, blaming Trump for this, through their stooges in Congress, through their stooges in the bureaucracy, through the various NGOs that they are funding, and organize all of that into a very well-calculated campaign to undermine his ability to function and eventually to replace him with the appropriate globalist candidate in the next presidential election, for sure. If they can't impeach him or somehow get him to resign, they have some other schemes that they may have in mind. But it should be done in a measured and systematic way, not kind of roll the dice and hope that it's going to come up 7. Right? So I do not see them in a position where they would crash the economy in the apocalyptic sense. But the economy could crash itself in the apocalyptic sense. Because the international monetary system is a confidence game.
Yeah,
in the sense of that word. And once confidence fails,
all it takes is wet behind the ears trader there pushing the wrong button.
That's right. That's why it's so dangerous for the globalists, because they have created a situation in which they are sitting on a bomb of their own making.
Yes.
Without the ability to be sure that that bomb is not going to go off. They really do not have control of the system in that sense. So, they're playing, in a sense, they're playing Russian roulette with a semi-automatic pistol. If you know what I mean.
Yes.
Okay. They're in that position. I wouldn't want to be in their position now that the people in the United States and some other countries, because you see the populist candidates in Europe also seem to be making some political hay. Now that the people have awakened to who is responsible for these problems and actually have a figurehead in Mr. Trump. I mean, he's symbolic more than anything else. He's symbolic of the kind of leader that's necessary for the people to regain control of their own country. Whether he's capable of doing that or not is another question, right? But he has given the people the opportunity to see that they can actually gain control of the political system, because there he is as president against all odds. And they can hope that he'll take the right steps to deal with these problems. If he doesn't, well, then we have a problem, because on the one hand, the globalists may return to control of the White House, and on the other hand, the deplorables may really, lose faith, lose hope. When we tried to do it, we failed. We can never achieve what we need to do. I look at Trump as the first step in this. I don't assume that in 4 years or in even 8 years you're going to correct all of these problems. They've been here festering for too long. You have to take the first steps in a sequence of correction. This is like long-term medical treatment of someone who has a series of diseases. And it'll be maybe the fellow who follows Trump that will actually get the reforms really moving. He's the first figure. But if he fails, for whatever reason, then that would very well set back the ability of the people to regain control of their country for a very long time, if not forever.
Because the people in this election gave us deplorables out here a reason to hope a little.
Exactly. A reason to hope, a demonstration that the people can regain control over the political system, at least to the extent of putting in a president. I mean, you have the bureaucracy, you have the judiciary, you have some problems still with Congress and so forth. But at least you could put this man in as president, and he's in a position to make serious inroads on the power of the globalists. And now we want to see what he's going to do. We know that they are not going to go away. We know that they will pull out every stop to destroy him. They've made that absolutely clear.
Yes.
There is nothing that is beyond what they are capable of doing.
Well,
their only problem is they can't go too far because they don't want to create a backlash type situation. They don't want their names, addresses, and pictures showing up on the internet of here's the people behind this, folks. Here's the ones behind it. That's right. They love to stay in the shadows and have all sorts of dummies out there in front serving their interests. Absolutely. But nonetheless, here's Trump, and what we've seen is they've unleashed the mad dogs on the other side. All right? Have you ever seen politically? I mean, I've been thinking about politics since when, late 1950s. All right, what's it, 70 years almost? Have you ever seen any opposition to any political figure in this country as rabid as the Democrats, the leftists, the neo-Bolsheviks, and so forth have unleashed against Trump? No, absolutely not. I mean, this is incredible. This is like something coming out of a banana republic in Central or South America. Well, it's this just level of vitriol. Yeah, it's just like the last Saturday and that Women's March. That didn't happen spontaneously. Oh, no. That was planned meticulously to renting the buses and loading the women up from Boston and New York and, everything. We had a first-hand report yesterday on the show of, Kevin said a lot of these women looked like they just smoked their crack pipe because they got paid to be on the bus to come down and demonstrate. Well, for those who are interested in studying this phenomenon of the color revolutions that George Soros has been financing, the name given to them, you need to go to your local library and get some books by a fellow by the name of Gene Sharp, G-E-N-E-S-H-A-R-P. I think he's deceased now, but he taught up in the Boston area for many years. He wrote a series of books on nonviolent revolution, regime change, which essentially are the intellectual Bibles of what the Soros-type organizations are doing, with a little bit of Alinsky tactics and so forth dumped in there, a little bit of that rough type of behavior. But you read these books by Gene Sharp, and you can say, well, this is the blueprint. This is exactly what they're following. And they're going to try to do the same thing to Trump that they have done in other countries of the world in these official color revolutions. Right? Yes. That's the plan. And let's face it, they have the American population divided. You have one-third that voted for Hillary, approximately one-third that voted for Trump, and then the people in the middle who didn't bother to vote at all, and I guess were willing to take whatever the result was of the election. As long as my Obama phone keeps working, you betcha. Stay here. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back here on the American Freedom Network.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldAndSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
.com. The articles we're talking about here, a monetary litmus test for Mr. Trump, subtitled President Trump, the Deplorables and the Bankers. You can find his seminars and presentations at YouTube.com and his books available at Amazon.com. Well, there's calls for ending the Fed, auditing the Fed, Federal Reserve, to what point? Are we going to audit it and find that Alan Greenscam has got most of the bars left in Fort Knox stashed under his bed?
No, I've always wondered about the audit the Fed movement, at least in the sense of what the proponents of that think will be the result among the general population. Because if you look at the statutory mandate that Congress foolishly gave to the Federal Reserve,
yes, over 100 years ago.
They've updated it. I think the Humphrey Hawkins bill was 1946 or 40, something like that. But you look at that language, and you say, well, this is so amorphous, it's so plastic, that it covers almost anything that they could claim was beneficial to the economy.
Yes.
So you start getting into that, and I think that's what the audit the Fed people are talking about. They're not expecting to find that money has been stolen and they've had too many Mercedes limousines or whatever purchased. But they're looking into policy decisions that were made by the Federal Reserve over various periods of time. And that's where you get into all of this economic and Keynesian gobbledygook, which the average person can't possibly understand. And people will be arguing about that till, the turn of the next century, whether a particular decision was prudent or imprudent. So I don't see that that's going to accomplish anything in the short term, and we really have to think in the short term because of the fragility of the financial system. If you talk about ending the Federal Reserve, that's another mantra, abolish the Fed, right? That's not as easy as it is to say, because there is no such thing as the Fed. there's this complicated banking cartel, and it has various structures within it, and at the lowest level, it's made up of all of the commercial, national, and state banks in the country.
Well,
and we're not going to abolish them.
It's your bank down on the corner of Main Street in Tranquility.
Well, that's right. It's a Wachovia Bank or State Street Bank or whatever, and they're going to be there. They have to be there. They can't be abolished. If you talk about abolishing the Fed as a concept, well, then what happens to the currency? What happens to Federal Reserve notes? Federal Reserve notes are generated by this creature called the Federal Reserve System. That's their sole source and their sole source of legitimacy. So if you eliminate certain parts of the Federal Reserve System, the 12 regional banks, the Board of Governors, where you eliminate Federal Reserve notes too, then what is the currency that the country is generally going to use? We don't really have a practical alternative to Federal Reserve currency.
No.
So you have some real practical problems here with that. And that's why I have always proposed that this has to be taken in a step-by-step sequential manner. And the first thing that needs to be done is we have to get an alternative currency into circulation.
Well,
for two reasons.
Let me throw this idea out.
All right.
We passed the National Economic Stability Act, written by NORM, National Organization for Raw Materials. In there, it calls for monetizing the raw material wealth. You can also monetize the infrastructure. That as the raw material wealth comes off the land, the no recourse commodity loans are paid in United States notes from the Commodity Credit Corporation. If the farmer, which is most of the raw materials, chooses to take the loan. So for every United States note printed by the Treasury, one fraudulent reserve note is extinguished until we replace the currency with United States notes it put into circulation without debt.
Well, except you just said they were put into circulation as a result of a loan.
Well, the loan, the way that worked from 1941 to 1953 is the commodity, the bushel of wheat, was the collateral. And it wasn't, the loan was not on, future production of, well, we may have a good crop or we may not. It was the actual production. It was monetized. The farmer had the ability to say, okay, I'll take the loan now, and in 180 days, I can pay the loan off and get my wheat back, or the loan expires, and now the government owns the bushel of wheat. They can turn around, put it on the market, and sell it. When we did this from 41 to 53, the government made roughly $4 million. It didn't cost a dime. And then on the infrastructure side, if we want to build a new bridge, you say, okay, here's the bids. We're going to pay you in the United States notes, but we're only going to pay you, construction company, as the work is completed. And we chop it up into sections, however it is, in a week, a month, 60 days. As soon as the work is completed, we pay you. The money comes in not as a bond issue, not as a loan, but we just issue it from the Treasury. For every United States note issued for that, we extinguish a Federal Reserve note until we reach a point where there's no more circulating Federal Reserve notes and where the money, the currency then, is United States notes issued by the Treasury. Does that sound feasible?
Well, I don't know what the authority for issuing paper money could possibly be under the United States Constitution, so I don't even get into the economics of that kind of a proposal.
It comes under the National Emergency and the Agricultural Adjustment Act.
That's a statute.
The Secretary.
That's a statute. 43A of the Agricultural Adjustment Act of the Emergency. Agricultural.
Right.
Section 43A of the $3 billion. Well, most of what Roosevelt did in 33 and 34, 35 was unconstitutional. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? All right. I love people going back to that. But one of the most unconstitutional administrations in American history, especially the New Deal part of it, the first 4 years, and using that as a model.
Well, what else do we got? Stay tuned. We'll be right back here on the American Freedom Network.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on Internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
On YouTube, and his books available at Amazon.com. And I agree with you. Most everything done in 33 in the Congress in Roosevelt was unconstitutional. Unless you take a look at the, state of national emergency that we're still in and still under concerning agriculture and banking and
but there you go.
Things.
There you go. There is no constitutional provision that provides for states of emergency.
No.
This is an invention. All right? They use this to stampede people politically into accepting the radical legislation they want to pass. Oh, we have an emergency. We have to do this, right? Just abstract, step back from that and say, wait a minute. Even assuming this is an emergency in a dictionary sense, what are the legal consequences? Is there an emergency powers provision in the U.S. Constitution that says when an emergency arises defined in some way, new powers are capable of exercise by Congress?
No.
Or the president becomes a dictator? But my mind boggles when I hear this kind of talk, not from you, but from people who propose it. Because I simply say, look in the Constitution and tell me where this authority is.
Well,
and of course, they can't find it.
We can declare war.
Well, you can you can declare war. Declare war on, Russia or China or Serbia or whatever. What is that to do with?
You mean we can't declare war on drugs and poverty?
Well, you see, there you go. That's another trick that that they've used, right?
Yeah.
We can declare war on drugs. We can declare war on organized crime. We can declare war. And at that point, then they say, well, now we're in a war, and we can exercise powers that are outside of control by the Bill of Rights, right? Don't worry about the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, Second Amendment, right? Because we're at war, all right?
Right.
Well, okay, we're at war with the mafia, or at war with organized crime, right? Does that mean that those people can simply be shot down in the street? You think this guy's a mafia figure? We can just gun him down? We don't worry about taking him to trial? I mean, this is a nonsense. We're living in a nonsense society here where they throw words out and people pay no attention to the context, what those words mean in the legal context, at least. All right?
Well,
it's not difficult.
We can call you a domestic combatant terrorist in indefinite detention.
You got it. That's exactly right. So they declare war on terrorism, and then certain things follow as a consequence of this generalized definition of war, and all of a sudden you discover that if you say something contrary to some principle of the Obama administration, you're a domestic terrorist, and you're put on a watch list, and you're denied this right or that right or whatever. I mean, and nobody stands up and says, wait, but the emperor has no clothes here. Right? What you're talking about, the terms that you're using are not being used in the constitutional context. You're just making this stuff up. And people don't stand back and say, well, it's all baloney. No matter how thin you slice it, it's still baloney. Now, if we get to the monetary question, here these people have various paper money reform schemes, but how would you put that into effect? You'd have to go to Congress to pass the appropriate legislation. And there's your difficulty.
You and I get there in front of the table and we tell Congress in the hearings, if you don't pass this through and allow the President and the Treasury and the Bureau of Printing to issue the United States notes, there'll be riots in the street by morning.
Well, I don't know. We'll get to that in a moment. My purpose in writing that article was to show what a Trump administration could do with the statutes that are already on the books.
Okay.
He doesn't have to go to Congress, or he doesn't have to go to the court system, because some of these reforms that would challenge the banks would find support for the banks in Congress. You got these rhinos, neocons, as well as the Democrats, who would certainly oppose any significant reform legislation aimed at the banks. So if I were in Mr. Trump's position, the first thing I would look around for is, well, what can I do with the present statutory structure, present powers I have under the banking code and other sections of the U.S. code? So that was the point of that article. There are various things that he can do directly. Now, in terms of this kind of apocalyptic scenario, which is the left, the neo-Marxist scenario in this country. If you don't give us what we want, we'll riot. All right? Well, they're organized to riot. They have all of these NGOs that are well-staffed with people who have studied the Gene Sharp color revolution theories. They have huge amounts of money pouring in from George Soros and many of these other left-wing foundations and leftist billionaires.
And they've got huge databases of snowflakes that'll go out and hold a sign and raise hell for $150 a day.
That's right. They have these boots on the ground already organized. And our difficulty is, well, we don't have the money, our side. We don't have the Soros-type figure pouring billions into this. We don't have a network of NGOs supporting our constitutional rights. I mean, we have some. There's a National Rifle Association to the extent that they really understand the Second Amendment. I'll leave that aside. Small number of those, but nothing that compares to this network of leftist organizations that are financing and operating. And then, of course, the boots on the ground, they can bring huge numbers of people into these operations because they have done the local organizing work that we haven't. I mean, it's one thing for Bikers for Trump to show up at the inauguration, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine. But were there counter-demonstrators? whatever the number of people that were there demonstrating against Trump's inauguration, were there counter-demonstrators? No. There were a lot of people who wanted to get into the inauguration and see that and participate in that as normal individuals. But here we had a huge group of, actually in many instances, violent protesters, and our side couldn't even come up with the non-violent counter-demonstrators.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Finish off today's show here on the American Freedom Network.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188. If you'd like to get a copy of this program, you may subscribe at FirstAmendmentRadio.com for only $45 a month, and you'll receive an MP3 CD weekly of all of our programs. As a bonus, we'll send you a password for our audio archives online. That's a $15 value. Or you may request any month of any program on one MP3 CD for a minimum donation of only $25, or any single program on tape, MP3 CD, or CD for only $15. You may do all of this online at FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Just follow the instructions to make a donation or subscribe. You may also adopt an hour of your favorite program. Please don't forget that most of the programs on FirstAmendmentRadio.com are listener-supported. Don't do Internet? Then call 559-781-3773 and we'll be honored to help you. Thank you from all of us here at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Trump forward that over and over again, folks, to the White House. And you lay out in there that he has the authority to rein in the bankers and to start the process to bring us back to an honest money system. But we have to find a way, Dr. Vieira, to put the money into circulation without debt.
There are a number of ways to do that. I don't worry about that.
Okay.
I don't think the mechanism is the problem. I think it's the political problem, getting control of the political system and getting those reforms enacted through regulation, which he can do to some extent now.
So, do we need to set up an NGO called the Deplorables, Inc.?
Well, you made a very good point there. You said people have to contact the Trump administration and so forth. Because I think the mentality is, after this election, thank goodness we evaded the horrible possibility of Mrs. Clinton being elected. Now we have Trump in there, and he's promised to do these various good things for us, for the deplorables. And we can now just sit back and watch him do that. We don't have anything more to do. We did our part. We voted for him, and now it's in his hands. Wrong. He is going to need as much support as can be generated from the grassroots level if he's going to succeed.
Yes, he needs to be able to say, his press secretary needs to be able to come out there and say, now look, over the last 30 days, we've had 50 million emails addressing the monetary issue. We've had 50 million emails addressing the immigration issue, or 100 million.
Right.
He needs to be able to, and it's up to you folks, it's up to you to do that. Because if not, who are we going to get? We'll probably get someone worse than Hillary Clinton on the next go-round.
And right now, the other side is organized to generate a huge amount of, well, I would call it astroturf opposition, right? Because it's being financed by, it's not really grassroots, it's being financed by the Soros-type millionaires.
Yes.
But it's going to be promulgated through the mainstream media, through demonstrations in the streets and so forth and so on, attacking everything that Trump wants to do. And so they will create a kind of a false appearance of a huge amount of popular dissatisfaction, dissent, and so forth and so on, right?
A false appearance of legitimacy.
Yeah, and give them this false appearance of legitimacy, and on the other side, that the Trump administration is somehow illegitimate because a great number of people don't, in fact, support him. So if his supporters don't get out now, stop thinking that they've won. The fight has just begun. All right? They've just gotten into the ring. They've got the opportunity to get into the ring here with Trump as the president. Now they have to put in even more effort.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.